There was blood on his cuff, and the first thing he asked her for was the burnt rice at the bottom of the pot. 4 in the morning. Mia Torres, 24, a black private chef in a house that never learned her name, counts 11 plates, because 11 plates means 11 men are still alive. $18,400 taped inside the flour tin. Her mother's dialysis invoice folded under the band. Upstairs lives Kang Min Jae. They call him the Quiet One. Black wool suit, no tie, top button open so the ink shows, a dragon coiling from his collarbone to just behind his ear, platinum watch. 600 guests already invited to his wedding. His bride returns an untouched plate to the service kitchen. It smells like her, she says. Serve in gloves. Mia says yes. She puts them on. Then, at 2:40 in the morning, the man who owns the house comes down the service stairs and stands at her pass. He asks her questions nobody in that house has ever asked her. 11 nights. On the 12th, she finds a dented brass spice tin on her cutting board, filled with her grandmother's wild sesame. He never mentions it again, and the house starts answering her out loud, objects that match sentences she said months ago, to no one. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Mia Torres wiped the 11th plate rim with the corner of her apron and counted the plates again, because the number of plates was the number of men, and the number of men told her how long the night would run. 11. 4 in the morning. She slid the tray onto the pass and rang nothing, because nobody in the Kang house rang bells for the cook. Loretta came down the service stairs with flour on her forearms. 11? 11. Then somebody's still alive. Loretta pulled her bandana straight and took the sauce spoon out of Mia's hand before Mia could taste again. The braised short rib had been holding at temperature since midnight. Mia lifted the lid, tilted the pot, watched the fat break the surface and settle. She spooned the liquid over each portion in 3 passes, the way she did when the meat had waited too long and needed the shine back. Scallion, a thread of chili. The last thing she added was the wild sesame, ground that afternoon in the mortar, and the smell came up off the plates and filled the whole low ceiling of the service kitchen. Loretta breathed it in. Your grandmother's? My grandmother's. They won't know. They'll eat it. Seokjin came for the tray at 4:06, earpiece in, driving gloves still on. He took 11 plates on a wheeled cart without counting them, because Mia had never once been wrong, and rolled the cart to the elevator that went up to the east dining room. The doors closed. Mia listened to the cable move through the wall, and then she was alone with Loretta, and the sound of the dish machine finishing its cycle. She had 18 minutes before the plates came back. The flour tin sat on the 3rd shelf, second from the wall. Behind the sack of rice nobody moved, because it weighed more than Loretta. Mia took it down with both hands. She peeled the lid, pushed her fingers into the flour, and found the packet taped flat against the inner curve, where a hand reaching for flour would never touch it. You're going to get white fingerprints on your money, Loretta said, not looking up. That's the idea. Mia counted on the steel counter, in stacks of 1,000, the bills soft from being counted. 18,400. She had come into this house with $206 and a knife roll her mother had paid for in 3 installments. 22 months later, 18,400. Under the rubber band, folded into a square the size of a matchbook, was the invoice. She unfolded it because she unfolded it every week. Dialysis, 3 sessions, plus the line for the transport van, plus the line for the thing they called facility support that nobody could explain to her over the phone. $1,140 for the month. Her mother's name printed at the top in a font that made it look like a receipt for shoes. Mia did the arithmetic she had already done. 1140 out, 2,800 in, if she kept the private event bonuses. That left the rest for the room on Vermont Avenue, with the gas line and the cracked tile, and the landlord who had told her he would hold it 8 more months, maybe 9, for somebody who paid in cash. 61,000. That was the number. Build out, hood, permits. 3 months of nobody coming. She taped the packet back inside the tin, pressed the flower flat with her palm, and set the tin on the 3rd shelf, 2nd from the wall. Loretta was watching her over the tortoiseshell glasses. How far? Far enough that I'm not going to say it out loud. Superstition. Arithmetic. The dumbwaiter chimed at 4:24. Mia opened it, expecting the returned plates, and there were 10, scraped clean, bones stacked the way men stack bones, when the food was good and they were too busy talking to notice they had finished it. 10. She set them in the sink and turned back to the dumbwaiter for the 11th. Han So-yeon carried it herself. She came down the service stairs in a camel coat she had not taken off, holding the plate flat on her palm like a waiter, nude heels striking each step at the same interval. Behind her, Park Tae-woo descended with his hands at his sides and his eyes on the back of her head. Mia dried her hands. Seo-yeon set the plate on the pass. The short rib had been turned over once with a fork and left. The scallion had been pushed to the rim in a neat arc, the way a person clears space to make a point. Whose recipe is this? So-yeon said. There was no question mark anywhere in it. Mine. The seasoning. Mine. So-yeon lifted the plate, brought it toward her face, and inhaled once, deliberately, the way a sommelier does for an audience. Then she held it out at arm's length toward Mia, and turned her head slightly away from it. It smells like her, she said. Loretta's spoon touched the steel. Small sound. In that kitchen, at that hour, it landed like a dropped tray. Mia held her hands at her sides, flour still under the nails. Like who, ma'am? Like a woman. Seo-yeon set the plate down. Food should smell like food. It comes upstairs and it smells like somebody's skin. Tae-woo's gloved hand moved half an inch, then went still. The sesame is toasted in a dry pan, Mia said. It's stronger when it's fresh ground. Then grind it less fresh. It's the whole dish. Then change the dish. Seo-yeon turned the 5-carat ring around her finger with her thumb. 1 full rotation. She looked past Mia at the shelves, at the pots, at the flour tin, and Mia felt her own pulse move in her throat and kept her chin level. 11 men ate it, Mia said. Seo-yeon's eyes came back, and 1 didn't. The refrigeration compressor cut in behind them. Nobody used the 7 seconds it ran. Mr. Park, Seo-yeon said. Madam. The kitchen staff will wear gloves. Serving, plating, handling. Anything that leaves this room, she touches it in gloves. Tae-woo's throat moved. The house is being married in 9 days. So-yeon straightened the cuff of the coat. After that, it stops being what it has always been. She looked at Mia for the first time, as though Mia were a person and not a surface. You're very good, she said. That's the problem I'm solving. Then she went up the stairs, 1 heel strike per step, and the door at the top closed with the soft pull of a hinge that had been oiled by somebody paid to oil it. Tae-woo stayed. He took his glasses off, breathed on 1 lens, wiped it with a cloth from his breast pocket, and put them back on. It took him 11 seconds, and he used all of them. Nitrile or cotton? Mia asked. Nitrile. There's a case in the linen store. He paused. Miss Torres, I'll wear them. I was going to say the food was correct. I know it was. Tae-woo lifted the untouched plate off the pass and carried it to the bin himself, which was not his job, and scraped it, which was not his job either. He set the empty plate in the sink, the burn scar on the back of his right hand catching the light over the basin, and went up. Loretta waited until the door was shut. 9 days. 9 days. And then what? She redecorates you? Loretta yanked the bandana off, shook her hair out, tied it again tighter. She's never come down here. 22 months. She sends the tablet with the menu changes. She's never once. She came down for the smell. She came down because somebody upstairs said something about the smell. Loretta pointed the spoon. Nobody walks a plate down 3 floors at 4 in the morning over sesame. Mia turned the tap on hot and let it run over the plate. Steam came up between them. Say it, Loretta said. There's nothing to say. You've got a face like a shut door. That's the face I'm paid for. Mia washed the plate herself, dried it, and put it back on the stack, and then she went to the linen store, past the ironing table, and the shelves of folded white, and found the case of gloves on the bottom shelf where things nobody wanted were kept. 200 pairs. She carried the box back with both arms. She set it on the counter and looked at it for a while. 22 months ago, the agency had sent her here for a 2-week cover, and the head of the kitchen had quit in the 2nd week over something Mia was never told. She had cooked alone for a house of 40 for 9 days before anybody thought to ask her name. Taewoo had written it down on an index card. Mia Torres, private chef. He'd asked her how to spell it, and she'd spelled it, and that was the entire ceremony. She had learned the house the way you learn a stove. Which burner runs hot? Which door sticks? Which men come in through the garage and which come in through the front? She learned that when the black cars parked nose out instead of nose in, dinner would be late and there would be fewer plates than expected. She learned to never ask about the fewer plates. She had learned that the man who owned the house ate almost nothing. She peeled the first pair of gloves out of the box and put them on. They pulled tight across the knuckles. She flexed her fingers twice. How's it feel? Loretta said. Like cooking through a phone. You can't season through those. I'll taste with a spoon. You taste with your hands. I've watched you do it. You touch the rice to know if it's... Loretta. Mia said it flat. I need this job for 8 more months. Loretta shut her mouth. Mia went to the mise station and started the morning prep in the gloves, because the morning prep started whether or not anybody had slept. Stock on. Aromatics down. 12 heads of garlic. She broke them with the flat of the knife, and the gloves slipped on the peel, and she had to pinch each clove twice instead of once, and 12 heads of garlic became a task that took 19 minutes instead of 8. Halfway through, a clove shot out from under the blade and skidded across the floor. Mia bent, picked it up, dropped it in the bin, and started that head again. Loretta watched from the pastry corner, with her arms crossed, and kept whatever she was thinking behind her teeth. You want me to do the garlic? No. I have hands. You have dough proofing, and 40 brioche at 7. Loretta went back to the dough. She slammed it down on the marble harder than the dough required, and Mia let her have that. At 5:40, she carried the compost bucket out to the service court. The air was cold and smelled like wet stone. 2 of the black cars sat nose out under the portico, with their engines ticking as they cooled. A 3rd car was being hosed down by a man she had seen twice and never spoken to, and the water running off the rear wheel well came off pink for the first few seconds, and then came off clear. Mia emptied the bucket. She rinsed it at the spigot. She went back inside. At 6:10, the tablet on the wall lit up with the day's changes, sent from Seo-yeon's assistant, and Mia read them standing. Wedding tasting, 11 days. No, 9. 9 days. Menu locked at 14 courses. 200 at the rehearsal, 600 at the ceremony. Below that, in the same clean type, kitchen presentation standards updated. See head butler. And below that, one line that had nothing to do with the wedding. Chef will no longer plate the family's private meals. Suze will plate. Mia read it twice. Loretta came and read it over her shoulder and said a word Mia had never heard her say. There's no Suze, Mia said. There's no Suze. So the line means she wants me to know she can write it. So the line means you're out in 9 days. Mia turned the tablet face down on the shelf. She took her phone out of her apron. 2 missed calls from her mother, 11:20 p.m. and 11:41 p.m., which meant the ride hadn't come again, which meant her mother had taken the bus to the clinic with the port in her arm and the bag on her lap. She stood in the walk-in with the door propped on her hip because it was the only place in the house with no cameras and a signal, and she called. Her mother picked up on the 4th ring and said her name like she was setting down something heavy. The van didn't come, Mia said. The van comes when it comes. I'm going to call them. You called them in March. I'll call them in July. Her mother laughed, and the laugh turned into the cough, and Mia stood in the cold with her hand flat against the shelf of butter until it finished. Are they feeding you up there, baby? I'm the one who feeds them. That's not what I asked. Mia looked at the gloves on her hands, blue at the wrist where the flower had gotten under. 8 more months, she said. Then the room on Vermont. Then you sit down and somebody brings you a plate for once. Her mother's voice went careful, the way it did when she was about to say the true thing. You sound like your grandmother when you lie. I'm not lying. You're leaving something out. That's the family version. The compressor kicked on inside the walk-in, and Mia let it cover the pause. I have to go, she said. Service. At 6 in the morning, breakfast for a house full of men who came home at 4. Her mother said again. Mia. Yes. Whatever it is up there, you don't owe those people your grandmother. Mia ended the call and stood in the cold long enough that her fingers stopped feeling the phone. Then she came out, stripped the gloves, threw them in the bin, pulled a fresh pair, and started the eggs. At 7:15, Tae-woo came down with a laminated card and hung it beside the pass. Presentation standards. Item 4 was the gloves. Item 6 said the kitchen would not send anything upstairs with an aroma detectable in the corridor. Mia read item 6 twice and said nothing, and Tae-woo watched her read it and said nothing, and then he took the mortar off the shelf, the stone one, with the sesame residue still in the grain, and set it inside the lower cabinet, closed the door, and stood in front of it a second longer than the movement required. It stays in the house, he said. Is that permission or a warning? It's where the mortar is. He left. Loretta came out of the pastry corner, with her hands full of dough, and her mouth already open, and Mia lifted one finger, and Loretta shut it again. Breakfast went up at 7:40. 6 plates. It came back at 8:05, 6 plates, all clean. At 8:20 the elevator moved again, down, not up. Nobody in that house came down to the service kitchen after breakfast. Mia was at the sink with her sleeves rolled and both hands in the water when she heard the cable, and she reached for the towel before the doors even opened, and by the time the light above the elevator turned from red to white, she had already pulled the second glove on. The doors opened. It was Kang Do-yoon, jade beads on his wrist, coat across his shoulders, and he looked at Mia for a long moment, the way a man looks at a chair he is thinking about moving. You're the cook, he said. Yes, sir. 9 days from now, Do-yoon said, this family becomes something else. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Mia held the towel with both gloved hands. No, sir, she said. I don't. Do-yoon smiled with the lower half of his face only, stepped back into the elevator, and let the doors close on her. Mia worked the rest of that day with the elevator in the corner of her eye. 14 courses, locked. She wrote them out twice, once for the tablet and once for herself, and the second list had the timings on it, which sauce could hold, which one died after 4 minutes, which of the 14 would fall apart if 200 people sat down late. Nobody upstairs had asked for that list. She made it anyway. Loretta laminated her own brioche schedule out of spite and taped it beside the standards card. Item 4, she said, tapping the gloves line. Item 6. Item 7 is going to be no breathing. Roll your dough. At 2 in the afternoon, Tae-woo brought down a sous chef. The man was 40, from an agency in Pasadena, and he stood in the doorway with his knife roll under his arm, while Tae-woo said the word, temporary, twice. Mia gave him the vegetable station and watched him break down a case of leeks. He was fast, he was clean, he salted nothing without asking. At 6, he asked her where the family's plates went. Up, she said. Who plates them? You do, starting when they tell you. He looked at the elevator, then at her, and went back to his leeks. He had understood something in 4 seconds that Loretta had spent all morning refusing to understand, and Mia respected him for it and disliked him for it in the same breath. He left at 9. The house went quiet at 11. She stayed. She always stayed, because the house ate at hours that had nothing to do with dinner, and because the walk-in inventory had to be done before Thursday, and because her mother slept from 10, and calling later than that was cruelty. At 2:40 in the morning, the service door opened, and Kang Min-jae came into her kitchen. She had seen him 14 or 15 times in 22 months, across a courtyard, through a car window, once at the top of the stairs with his back to her. He had never come down the service stairs, and the service stairs were the only way to that door. He stopped at the pass and put both hands flat on the steel. There was blood on his left cuff, not much. A stripe the width of a pencil along the fold where the shirt met the watch, dried to brown at the edge, and still dark in the middle. He made no attempt to cover it. You're still here, he said. Inventory. At 3. It's quiet at 3. He looked at the pot on the back burner. The rice had been down there since the 11 plates went up, the pot scraped out for the cart, the last layer welded to the bottom and gone the color of tea. She had been about to soak it. Is there any left? He asked. Rice? I can make fresh in 20 minutes. No. He came around the pass, which nobody from upstairs did, and looked into the pot the way a man looks into a well, the bottom, the burnt part. Her hands stopped in the sink. Her grandmother used to crack the crust off with the back of a spoon and eat it standing at the counter while everyone else sat down. $2 of ruined rice. She used to say the pot's mistakes belonged to the cook. That part gets thrown out, Mia said. By who? By everyone. Not by everyone. She dried her hands and took the pot off the burner and set it on the board. She pried the crust up in sheets with a bench scraper, poured hot water over half of it in a bowl, salted it, and put the other half dry on a plate with nothing on it. Then she stood there with a decision in her hands, because item 4 said gloves for anything leaving the kitchen, and item 6 said, nothing may leave the room smelling like anything, and this was not leaving the room. She served him at the pass, bare-handed, on a plate meant for staff. He ate, standing up. He ate all of it. She had watched trays come back from that man for 22 months, with the food arranged and cold and untouched, and here he was cleaning a plate of scorched rice with a soup spoon at 10 to 3. Who taught you to leave it that long? He said. Nobody. That's the pot burning. It's the same in Korean. We have a word for it. I know the word. He set the spoon down. How? A woman in the produce market on Western taught me. She sold perilla leaves, and she thought I was Korean on the phone. Mia took the plate away. She said my sesame was too strong for anybody but her. That was when he asked the second question, and the second question was about her grandmother, and Mia answered it, and that was the beginning of the count she never wrote down anywhere. 11 nights. Not 11 in a row. They landed across the calendar the way rain lands, twice in a week, then nothing for 9 days, then 3 nights running when the cars came back at 4, always after 2, always through the service door, never the elevator. He would put his hands flat on the pass and ask her something, and she would answer while she worked, and then he would go up. He asked her where she trained. She said a hotel in Long Beach, and then nowhere, because nowhere was cheaper. He asked her what she cooked when nobody was paying her. She said she ate cereal. He asked her the name of the dish her grandmother made on the last Sunday of the month, and she gave it to him in the family's word for it, not the real one, and he repeated it back exactly, and never asked what it meant. He asked once what she thought of the house. She said the house had good drains. He asked what she would change about the kitchen if somebody handed her a budget. She said the pass was too high, and gave the measurement, 38 inches, 4 too many, and every plate that crossed it lost heat while a shorter person reached. He looked at the pass for a long moment and asked nothing else that night. On the 6th night, he asked what she was saving for. She had a lid on that. She had kept the lid on it with Loretta, who had worked beside her for a year and knew only that a number existed. A room, she said. How big? 22 seats. Where? Somewhere with parking. She turned the burner down. That's the whole answer. He accepted it. That was the part that unsettled her afterward, walking to the walk-in with a clipboard she didn't need. He had let a door close and made no attempt to hold it open with his foot. Nobody in that place had asked her a question in 22 months that did not end in a plate. Tai-woo asked how many covers. Seo-yeon asked whose recipe. Do-yoon asked if she understood. The agency asked if she could start Monday. Her own mother asked if she was sleeping, which was a question, but a mother asking that is asking about herself. The 11th night was a Tuesday, 8 days before the wedding. He came down at 2:52 with his jacket over his arm and his sleeves already turned back, and Mia had the pot on before the door finished closing, which she noticed herself doing and disliked. 200 at the rehearsal, he said. 206. They always bring 6. You've done a rehearsal here? I've done 19 events here. She scraped the crust. The number on the tablet is never the number that eats. He sat on the stool by the linen shelf. He looked at the laminated card on the wall for a while, item 4, item 6, and his face did the thing his face did, which was nothing. You're wearing gloves for prep now. For anything that leaves the room. That's not what the card says. It's what I do. Why? She set the plate down harder than she meant to, because if I follow the card exactly, someone comes down here and finds a new way to be disappointed. If I go past it, there's nothing left to find. He turned the plate a quarter turn without picking up the spoon. 12 heads of garlic, he said. How long? In the gloves? Her chin came up. 19 minutes. And, without, 8. He nodded slowly, like a man being handed a number he had already priced. Who told you that? She said. Nobody tells me anything in this house. I watch the room, and I count. He picked up the spoon. The compost goes out at 5:40. The cars are hosed in the court. You empty it yourself instead of sending the kitchen porter, because he cracked a bin in March, and you paid for it out of your own money. Her ears went hot. That's not true. Which part? The porter didn't crack it. I did. The corner of his mouth moved. It was gone before it finished. Eat your rice, she said. He ate it. Then he stood, put the stool back against the shelf where it lived, and stopped at the door. There's a woman upstairs who thinks the kitchen smells like a person, he said. Mia's hands went still in the sink for the second time in 11 nights. Does it? She said. He looked at her for a beat too long. Then he went up the service stairs without answering, and she stood in the running water until it went cold over her wrists. She scrubbed the pot that night. She scrubbed it down to the metal and left it upside down on the rack and told herself she was done leaving rice in the bottom of anything. The next night, she left the rice. He did not come. 7 days out. The cars went out at 9 and came back at 1, and she heard nothing on the stairs. And at 4 in the morning, she pried the crust up and ate it standing at the counter with a spoon, and it was fine, and it tasted like her grandmother's kitchen, and she threw the rest away. 6 days out, the house tipped into wedding time. Florists at 7. A man from the tent company measuring the south lawn with a laser. Seo Yeon's assistant came down twice with printed seating charts, and both times asked Mia to confirm the 14 courses out loud, item by item, while she read along and made a small mark with a pencil. On the second pass, she stopped at course 9. There's sesame in 9. There's sesame in 9. Miss Han says no sesame in the wedding menu. Loretta's rolling pin stopped. Mia took the pencil out of the woman's hand, crossed out course 9, and wrote the replacement in the margin in block capitals so nobody would have to ask her to say it twice. Then she gave the pencil back. Tell her it's done. The assistant left. Loretta stood there with flour to the elbows. 6 days, Loretta said. You know what happens on day 7. I know what happens on day 7. Then why are you fixing her menu? Because I'm the chef until somebody tells me I'm not. Mia pulled the mortar out of the lower cabinet where Tae-woo had put it, looked at the sesame dust in the grooves of the stone, and put it back. And because 8 more months. That night the cars went out at 11 and came back at 2:15. 3 of them. She heard doors and then nothing, and then, at 2:40, the service door. He came in with his jacket already off and hung it on the back of the door, and there was nothing on his cuff, and he stopped further from the pass than usual. Sit down, he said. I'm working. You've been standing since 4 yesterday morning. I've been standing since 4 the morning before that. She kept her hands moving. The bottom's ready. It's been ready an hour. He didn't go to the pot. He had something in his left hand, held low against his leg, and he brought it up and set it on her cutting board, the end of the board, the corner she used for garlic, the corner closest to her right hand. A spice tin. Brass, small enough to close a fist around, the lid dented on one side like it had been dropped on a hard floor and kept anyway. The lacquer worn through to metal at the seam where a thumb goes. She looked at it and made no move toward it. Open it, he said. What is it? Open it. She wiped her hands on her apron. She twisted the lid, and it stuck the way old lids stick, and then it came, and the smell came up out of that tin and hit the back of her throat, and took 22 months and a hospital corridor and a linoleum kitchen floor with it. Wild sesame. Ground coarse, not fine. Toasted past the point every cookbook tells you to stop, to the edge where it goes bitter, then pulled, the exact 3 seconds her grandmother swore by and never explained. Mia put the lid back on. Her hand was not steady, and she made no effort to hide it, because hiding it would have taken a second hand. Where did you get this? From a woman in the produce market on Western, he said. She sells perilla leaves. She thought I was somebody's driver. That's... Mia stopped. Started again. I mentioned her once. You did. In March. April. He put his jacket over his arm. She wouldn't sell me the blend. She sold me the tin, and she made me stand there while she taught it to me, and it took her 4 visits, because she said I burn things. You went 4 times. The last time she got it right. The kitchen fan cycled and clicked and started again. Somewhere above them, a door closed, and a woman's heels went across a floor and away. Why? Mia said. He was already at the door with his hand on it. 6 days, he said. Don't leave it out where they can smell it. And then the service door shut, and the stairs took his weight going up, 4 flights, and Mia stood alone in her own kitchen at 3:10, with a dented brass tin, sitting on the corner of her board, where the garlic goes. She stood with the tin in her palm and did the arithmetic she did with everything, because arithmetic was the only tool she trusted at 3 in the morning. 4 trips to a produce market on Western, parking, or a driver waiting at a red curb. An old woman making a man in a wool suit toast seed in her back room until he stopped burning it. Nobody buys that by accident, and nobody buys it to be kind, and a thing that costs a man 4 afternoons is not a tip. She thought about the 10 plates coming back clean, and the 11th coming back, turned once with a fork. Then she thought about a woman upstairs with a wedding in 6 days, who had already smelled this exact tin on somebody's collar and called it a person. She did not open it again that night. She put it in the flour tin. 3rd shelf, 2nd from the wall, behind the rice sack, laid flat on top of $18,400 and her mother's invoice, and she pushed the sack back into place and turned off the lights and went to the walk-in and stood in the cold with her phone in her hand and nobody to call. In the morning, the sous chef broke down leaks. Loretta pulled 40 brioche at 7. The tablet posted the count for the rehearsal, 200, and Mia wrote 206 on her own list. And at 9:15, Tae-woo came down with white gloves on and a laminated card in his hand and said the presentation standards had been revised again. He hung the new card over the old one. Item 4, Item 6, and Item 9, added at the bottom in the same font as the rest. No ingredient may be brought into this house by staff from outside. Mia read Item 9 twice and then reached past Tae-woo for the walk-in door handle, because the lamb had to come out at 9:30 whatever the card said. He stepped aside. His gloves were already on at that hour, which meant he had come from upstairs and would be going back. "Did she write it?" Mia said. "The card is the house's." "That's not what I asked." Tae-woo squared the corner of the laminate against the tile grout, the way he squared everything, and went up the service stairs without giving her an answer she could repeat to anyone. She worked the lamb. 6 days out meant the ovens ran from 9 to 9, and the tent company had men on the south lawn shouting numbers at each other through the vents. The agency sous chef came in at 10 and started on leeks without being told, which was worse than if he'd asked. Loretta pulled her brioche at 7, and at 11 she pulled a second batch nobody had ordered, and left them cooling in a row where the sous chef needed the bench. At 1 o'clock, Mia went up to her room over the garage for the first time in 9 days. She went for her spare knife roll. The house gave her the room as part of the wage, 11 feet by 9, one window facing the wall of the pool house. Her bed was made because she made it. On the pillow, square to the seam, was a book, hardback, cloth spine gone soft at the head. Provincial Cooking of the South Coast. Printed in Seoul in 1978, 411 pages, the one her grandmother's teacher had written, and then died, before anyone thought to reprint. Mia had looked for it for 6 years. She had found 3 copies in 6 years, and each time the price had been more than her mother's rent. She held it without opening it for a while. Then she opened it, because she had waited 6 years, and there was nothing written inside. No card, no name, no inscription. Someone had gone through it and folded the corner of page 206, salted crab, the last Sunday of the month dish. Nobody in that house was supposed to know what page that was on. She put the book in her locker downstairs, under her street clothes, and went back to the lamb. The flowers came the next morning, 5 days out. She came down at 4:40, and there was a jam jar on the shelf beside the stove, the squat kind the kitchen used for stock reductions, filled with water to the shoulder. 6 white ranunculus, stems cut short. Mia stopped in the doorway with her jacket half buttoned. "Not me," Loretta said, from pastry, without looking up. "They came in the flower delivery. There's 400 stems in the cold room, and those were sitting out here in a jelly jar, like somebody's grandmother did it. White. White. There's nothing white on the wedding order." Mia knew the wedding order. She'd read it looking for kitchen conflicts, peonies, blush garden roses, 300 stems of something Italian. No ranunculus. She'd said the word ranunculus out loud, exactly once in 22 months, in this room, in March, to Loretta, with her hands in a bowl of cold water. Her mother had carried them. She'd said she hated cut flowers because they die on you already dying, except those, because those open after they're cut. She'd said it and moved on to the fish. Loretta was watching her now over the reading glasses. You gonna tell me? There's nothing to tell, Mia. 600 people are eating in 5 days, Mia said, and tied her apron and put the jar on the low shelf where the corridor cameras had no angle. She started making a list that night, not on the tablet, on the back of the second copy of the 14 courses, in pencil, in her own shorthand, the way she wrote timings. The book, 6 years, February, standing at the pass with a burned thumb, telling Loretta what she'd give to hold that book once. The flowers, March. The pass. He'd said the pass was 38 inches. She'd told him that on the 4th night. 4 days later, a maintenance man came down with a laser measure and left without cutting anything, and she'd assumed a fire inspection. She looked at the 3 lines and put the pencil down. He had been listening for months before he ever came down the stairs. The envelope arrived at 11 the next morning, 4 days out. Tae-woo brought it on the tray he used for correspondence, which nobody in the kitchen had ever been on the receiving end of. He set it beside her board, on the corner where the garlic went, and Mia's hands went still in the parsley. Payroll correction, he said, 2023 and 24. The private event bonuses were calculated at the wrong rate. The office found it in the audit. There was no audit. There was an audit. He said it the way he said the food was correct. Flat, level, and with his eyes somewhere over her shoulder. The envelope had weight to it. Not a check. She knew what $9,000 felt like in hundreds because she had counted $9,000 in hundreds out of the flour tin in February and driven it to the facility in Torrance in an envelope exactly this size to clear her mother's arrears before they moved her off the transport list. She had come back and stood in this kitchen and told Loretta the number out loud, once, because there was no one else to tell. 9,000. How much? Mia said. I wasn't given the figure. Mr. Park. I was given an envelope and a room to bring it to. She opened it with a paring knife, standing up, in front of him. She counted it with the back of her knuckle, 90 hundreds, gloved, which took twice as long, and which she did anyway. Payroll doesn't pay in cash, she said. No. Payroll doesn't correct 2 years to the exact dollar of what a person took out of their own savings. Tae-woo's jaw moved once. He looked for the first time in 22 months, like a man deciding whether to be in a room. Take the money, Miss Torres. Who signed it? Nobody signed it. That's the point of it. She put the bills back in the envelope, squared them, folded the flap, and held it out to him across the board. He put his hands behind his back. I can't return it. You can carry it. If I carry that upstairs, I'm carrying a message. Yes, Mia said. You are. They stood there. The sous chef, at the vegetable station 8 feet away, discovered something urgent about leaks. Loretta had stopped pretending to work entirely. Tae-woo took the envelope. He held it the way he held the pocket watch, flat in the palm, and then he did something Mia had never seen him do, which was look directly at her for a full 3 seconds. 22 months, he said. You've never asked this house for a single thing. I'm not asking now. That is what worries me. He went up. Loretta waited until the door swung shut twice, and then came around the bench so fast she knocked the bandana crooked. That was money. That was a leash. Mia, that was money. That was. Loretta stopped. Her hand went out toward the jar of ranunculus and hung there. How would he know about the flowers? He wouldn't. So who? 40 brioche, Mia said. 7 o'clock. Loretta looked at the jar. Loretta looked at the locker where the book was. Whatever arrived in her face then, she took it back to pastry with her, and she rolled dough for an hour without a word, which from Loretta was a scream. Mia worked the rest of the day at her normal speed, which was the tell if anyone in that house had known her well enough to read it. She never worked at her normal speed. She worked ahead. That day she worked exactly on time, every station, every course, and at 6 o'clock she went out to the service court with the compost and stood in the dark by the empty bins for 4 minutes, doing nothing at all. 2 cars, nose out, Sekjin on the phone by the hose, earpiece in, saying yes twice. She went back in and turned the ovens down, and then she went into the walk-in and called her mother. It rang 5 times. Her mother answered out of breath, which meant she had walked to the phone, which meant the good chair was too far from it again. You're calling at 6. Van come? Van came. A pause with a cough in it. Girl, they've been nice to me all month. They moved me up on the list. They put me Tuesday mornings, first slot, and the woman at the desk called me Mrs. Torres twice. Mia stood in the cold with the rice bags stacked to her shoulder and her breath showing. Since when? Since February, baby. Since you paid them. Another cough. You paid them, didn't you? I paid them. Then don't sound like that. Her mother waited. Mia, don't sound like that about the only good news I got. I'm glad about Tuesdays, Mia said, and she was. And she got off the phone before her voice did anything her mother could hear, and stood in the cold room another minute, doing the arithmetic she had been refusing to do since 11 that morning. February, 9,000, first slot. She came out and washed her hands to the elbow. At 9, the sous chef left. At 10, Loretta left, slower than usual, with a look Mia refused to take. At 11, the last of the tent crew rolled their trailer down the drive. At midnight, the kitchen was hers. She did not wait up for him. She went and found him. The dry store sat off the service corridor, past the linen room, 6 feet by 12, floor to ceiling, rice and flour and the case of gloves, and the 4 crates of shelf-stable product for the ceremony that Seo-Yun's office had ordered without consulting anybody who cooked. The house had one route to the private wing after midnight that avoided the front stair. It ran past that door. Mia propped the door open with a flour sack and worked the shelves with a clipboard, counting cases she had counted that morning, for 1 hour and 10 minutes. At 1:50, she heard the outside door. She heard him come along the corridor. He walked like a man who had been taught not to be heard, and mostly succeeded, and the mostly was how she knew it was him. His steps slowed at the light spilling out of the dry store. Kang Min-jae stopped in the doorway. You're up. Inventory. At 1 in the morning. 4 days out. She set the clipboard on the shelf at the height of her shoulder and turned around, and he understood in the turning that this was not inventory. He came in, he pulled the flour sack in with his foot and let the door close, which put the 2 of them in 6 feet of floor with 100 pounds of rice at their backs. Say it, he said. The book was February. Nothing moved in his face. The flowers were March. I said the word once, to Loretta, with my hands in a bowl, and you were not in this house that day. You were not in this state that day, and there are 6 of them in a jelly jar next to my stove. Her voice stayed where she kept it during service. The pass was the 4th night. A man came with a laser 3 days later. The pass is still 38 inches. Because you can't cut it before the wedding without somebody asking why. His shoulders came down 1/2 inch. That was the whole confession. And the envelope, Mia said. Tae-woo brought it back. $9,000, in hundreds, in that size envelope. Do you know what that is? She waited. She wanted him to have to say it. He held the silence, so she said it herself. That's my mother's arrears at a facility in Torrance, February. I drove it down myself. I told one person the number, and she's 40 years old and pulls brioche at 7. You told her in this kitchen. Yes. Then more than one person heard you, Min-jae said. And it was not a defense, it was an admission, and both of them knew it. Mia put her hand flat on the shelf beside her, because her hand wanted to do something else. You put a number back in my pocket that I took out of it. That's not a gift. A gift is a thing a person doesn't need. You gave me the exact shape of my hole. She heard her own voice go somewhere it had never gone in that house, and let it go there. You've been counting me, for months. Before you ever came down those stairs. Yes. Why? You know why. Say the word. He looked at the shelf over her head, then he looked at her, and stayed there, and the strand came forward, the way it did when he leaned. Because there is nothing in that house I chose, he said. I chose the rice you burned. Mia laughed. One sound, no shape to it, the laugh of a woman doing arithmetic at speed. 600 people, she said. 4 days. I know the number. 206 at the rehearsal, because they always bring 6, and you know that because I told you. 14 courses. Course 9 changed, because your bride can smell my grandmother on your food. She took the half step that closed it, and he held still, and she watched him hold still. Do you know what she made me do about it? Gloves. 200 pairs. 19 minutes for the garlic instead of 8. And you send me a book. You wanted the book. For 6 years. Yes. Her hand came up and she stopped it and put it down. And I will never open it in this house. But Mia. He had said her name aloud once before, on the 8th night, and she had thought about it for 2 days. No, she said. You want to know what the money buys? It buys me standing in a pantry at 2 in the morning, telling you the truth once, and then it's over. So here it is. There is a woman upstairs asleep in your house wearing 5 carats of your family, and in 4 days, 600 people are going to watch you put a second one on her hand. And on that day, you will still know how long I leave the rice. You'll know what I'm saving for, and the number of seats, and the name of the woman on Western. She held it. And you will never have me, not for a book, not for $9,000, not for the tin. The tin had a shape in the air between them, the second she said it. Neither of them had spoken of it since the night he set it down. You kept it, he said. Don't. You kept it. It's the only one that cost you nothing, Mia said. That's why. Min-jae's hand had come up to the shelf beside her head, flat. The platinum catching the bulb, and it stayed there. He was close enough that she could smell what he'd been in. Night air, car leather, and under it, faint. 3 days old and impossible. Wild sesame. She turned her face away from it. That was the only thing she did. 4 days, she said. Then I'm done being the reason your wife redecorates my kitchen. Don't call her that yet. Yet. Mia pushed the flour sack aside with her foot and put her hand on the door. That's the whole word, isn't it? Yet. She went out into the corridor and left him standing in 6 feet of rice and flour with his hand still on the shelf, and she walked back into her kitchen and put the sheet pans away, and it was only when she reached to turn the light off that she saw the jar had been moved. Not by her. 6 white ranunculus. On the high shelf now, in the corridor camera's angle, where anyone coming down the service stairs would see them from the 4th step. And 2 floors above her, in a bedroom she had never been inside, Han So-yeon was on her knees, in front of her fiancé's nightstand, at 2:10 in the morning, looking for the ceremony documents, with her hand already on the corner of a lacquered box wedged in behind the pillow. The box came out easier than she expected. So-yeon had braced for weight, for a lock, for something that would fight her. It slid from behind the pillow with the sound of lacquer on cotton, and sat in both her hands like a thing that had been waiting to be found. Black lacquer. mother of pearl at the corners. A single line of it. The kind of work that takes a man in Insadong 4 months and a deposit. She set it on the bed. She looked at the door first. The house was quiet in the way it only got between 2 and 4. When the cars were parked and the men were downstairs playing cards, they were too tired to win. Somewhere under her feet, a compressor cycled on. She had come up for the ceremony folder, the officiant's script, the seating annex, the 3 pages her mother wanted initialed by morning, and she had gone through his desk, his drawer, the leather case on the chair, and found none of it, because the folder was in her own office, where she had put it on Tuesday. She had known that for 6 minutes before she reached behind the pillow. The lid lifted without resistance. Inside, a bottle. Not a designer bottle, not the kind with a house name pressed into the glass. Squat, heavy-shouldered, hand-blown. A slight lean in the neck where the glass-blower's breath had run out. Amber liquid, 3/4 full. A stopper of unpolished wood. Under the bottle, a card. Thick cotton stock, cut by hand, the edge feathered. She lifted the bottle first. Her thumb found the stopper and pulled it a 1/4 inch, and the room changed. She knew it before her mind agreed to say it. Wild sesame, toasted past where anyone toasts it, that black-edged nuttiness that had been coming into her bedroom on her fiancé's collar for 6 weeks. Under it, sugar taken to the point where it stops being sweet. Something green at the far end, cut grass or crushed leaf, so faint it might have been the memory of the market on Western. She put the stopper back. Her hand kept moving after the glass stopped. Then she read the card. 4 words in his handwriting. She had seen that handwriting on a prenuptial annex, on a hospital consent form for his mother in the last month of her, on a note about a car. Small letters, hard downstrokes. The M. Built like a bracket. For Mia. Seo-yeon sat down on the edge of the bed her wedding dress was hanging 6 meters from. She read it again, because reading it again was a thing her hands could do while the rest of her arrived. Then she turned the card over, in case the back said something that made it survivable. The back was blank cotton fiber, and the ghost of the pen pressure coming through. She had been counting since the first week of June, not writing it down. Counting, the way her father had taught her to count a room before entering it, which was the only useful thing he had given her that did not have a bank behind it. 19 nights he had left the bedroom after 1 in the morning and come back before 5. 4 times a garment bag had gone into the house through the service entrance and never reached her hands, and she had checked with the atelier, and the atelier had sent nothing. 2 shirts to the laundry, with a smell on the collar that the laundry could not remove, and had apologized for in writing. One afternoon in April, her driver had followed his car to a produce market on Western, and reported a 50-minute stop and no phone calls made, and she had told the driver he was mistaken and paid him for the month in cash. She had done the arithmetic in June and reached a number she could live with. Men in this family kept things. Her mother's marriage had a woman in Busan in it for 11 years, and the estate came through intact. The rule was simple. It ends at the signing, or it goes somewhere the wife does not have to look at it. She had bet on the cook evaporating. 3 days after the ceremony, 1 call to the agency, 1 line item, and the smell leaves the house with the woman who makes it. She had never once considered that he would keep it in a box beside his pillow with the name spelled out. That was the part her chest could not get around. Not the woman, the spelling. She stood. Her legs took 2 seconds longer than usual. She carried the bottle to the window and held it against the security lights on the south lawn, where the tent frame stood half-raised and a night crew had left a ladder against it. The liquid was cloudy at the bottom, unfiltered. Custom work, small batch, made once. Made once meant a person made it. Seo-yeon put the bottle in the box, the card under the bottle, the box under her arm, and walked out of her fiancé's bedroom. She did not go to her own room. She went down 1 floor to the office she used for the wedding. closed the door, and sat with the box on the desk in front of the seating annex she had been pretending to look for. At 3:14 a.m., she called a number in Seoul, where it was afternoon. The perfumer's assistant answered on the fourth ring. So-yeon gave a name, not hers, the name of a woman who ordered for the family and who would not be awake to contradict her, and said she needed to confirm a delivery to a Los Angeles address for insurance. The commission from March, she said, the private one. There was typing. Then, the 70% perilla base. The client asked us 3 times to push the toast darker. We told him it would go bitter. And did it. He said bitter was correct. So-yeon looked at the tent frame through the window. How many bottles? 1. He didn't want a formula kept. We told him if it breaks, there's no second. She thanked the assistant, in a voice that came out level, and ended the call, and sat with her hand flat on the desk. March. The wedding contracts had been signed in March. She had worn oyster silk to the signing, and her father had cried, actually cried, in front of 2 attorneys, because the port share had been in negotiation since he was 40. Somewhere in that same month, Kang Min-jae had been on a call with a workshop in Seoul, explaining what burnt tasted like. She turned the ring on her finger, around and back. At 3:40 she went to the wing, where the house kept its own records, and pulled the visitor log, the delivery log, and the service entrance ledger, and she read 4 months of them the way she read balance sheets, which was to say, backwards, from the totals. The service entrance had a pattern. Not on his side, on the kitchen's. She had a floor plan of her own house in her head by now, and she laid the times over it. The kitchen staff log showed the chef clocking out at 11, 11:30, midnight. The camera index showed no motion in the service corridor after 1, which was impossible, because the corridor camera covered the only route to the private stair, and men came down that stair to smoke. She checked the index again. Motion events, corridor camera, week by week, February forward. There were fewer of them every month. Not 0, fewer. Somebody had learned the angle. At 4:05, the pastry oven fan came on 2 floors below her, and the whole west wall of the office made its small sound, and So-yeon realized she had been sitting still for 20 minutes with her hand on the lid. She was 3 days from a ceremony with 600 names on it. She ran that number the way she ran everything. 600 confirmed, 206 at the rehearsal, though the office had printed 200. 14 courses, her mother arriving Thursday, her father, who had waited 19 years for a piece of a port, standing in a tent on a lawn that belonged to the Kang family because his daughter had agreed to it at 24. She could not cancel. She had understood that at 2:11, before she opened the lid, in the way you understand the ending of a thing while you are still in the middle of it. So the question was not whether. The question was what the bottle was for. She held it up again. 1 bottle, no formula, no second. An object that cannot be replaced is not a gift. It is a statement about what its owner intends to still have next year. At 4:30, she called Tae-woo on the house line. He came in white gloves with the pocket watch chain crossing his waistcoat and stood at the correct distance from the desk, and she watched his eyes go to the lacquered box for less than half a second and then away, and she learned something she filed and did not use. How long has the chef been with the house? 22 months, madam. Who hired her? The agency sent her for a 2-week cover. I kept her. You wrote her name on a card. An index card, yes. Do you know her handwriting? He held the question a moment too long, the way an honest man does when a dishonest answer would be easier. I know her lists. So-yeon slid the card across the desk, face down, and turned it over with 1 finger, and watched his face and got nothing from it, which was itself the answer, because a butler who is genuinely surprised has a jaw. That is not her handwriting, she said. No, madam. Whose is it? I am not qualified to identify handwriting. She almost smiled. You've worked here 30 years. 31. And you would rather I fire you tonight than say his name in this room. Tae-woo folded his gloved hands. Madam, I would rather serve the house. The house? She turned the ring. The house is being married in 3 days. Yes, madam. You'll say nothing about this conversation. To whom, madam? He was better at this than her father's people. She let him go at 4:44 and sat listening to his shoes on the runner, and when the sound stopped, she wrote 3 words on the back of the seating annex and underlined none of them, because underlining is for people who might forget. At 6 o'clock, she went down to the private dining room and ate half a grapefruit that arrived on a tray under a cloche, carried by a man in gloves, and she looked at the gloves for a long moment. Her own rule. 9 days ago, she had put every hand in that kitchen into nitrile so that nothing would leave the room carrying a person on it, and the person had already been in her bedroom, in a box, in glass, in the one form no rule could reach. The grapefruit went back untouched, which meant a plate came down at 6:20 that nobody had refused for any reason anybody downstairs would ever guess. At 7:10, Kang Min-jae came into the dining room, dressed, watch on, and poured coffee he had no intention of drinking. Seo-yeon set her hands on the table. You're going to the port office, she said. Until 4. My mother lands Thursday at 1. Seok-jin has the car. Ordinary sentences. She had been building an entire marriage out of ordinary sentences for 14 months, and she had until this morning believed that was what marriages were made of. She looked at his collar, charcoal shirt, top button open, and nothing on it today at all. And the nothing was worse, because a man who is careful on a Tuesday was careless on a Monday for a reason. Do you want anything from the kitchen? She said. He set down the coffee. No. You never do. No. You haven't eaten a meal in this house in front of me since February. She said it flat, an entry in a ledger. I had the cook change 4 dishes for you. I had course 9 rewritten. You didn't notice. I noticed. That landed somewhere under her sternum, harder than the box had. Then why? She stopped herself. She had promised her own reflection at 5 in the morning that she would not ask a question whose answer she could not use in 3 days, and she kept the promise by 1 syllable. He waited. He was good at waiting. It was the thing everyone said about him in a room, and it was the first time in 14 months she had been on the receiving end of it and understood that the waiting was not patience, it was accounting. Nothing, she said. Go to the port. He went. In the doorway he paused, one hand on the frame, and for 1 second she thought he would turn around and say the thing, and the marriage would break in a dining room with a half grapefruit on the table, and nobody would have to smell anything. He looked at the tent on the south lawn instead, and left. At 9 o'clock, the florists came with 300 Italian stems, and Seo-yeon stood in the entrance hall and approved peonies for 40 minutes with a card in the pocket of her cashmere that said another woman's name in her fiancé's hand. At 11:30, she went to the service corridor for the first time since the night of the returned plate. She stopped on the 4th step of the stair, which is where a person stops, and looked down into the kitchen through the half-open service door. 6 white ranunculus in a glass jam jar on the high shelf, right in the camera's line, right where anyone descending would take them full in the face. She had put them there herself at 2:10, on her way up, after finding them on the low shelf tucked out of the angle. She had done it before she opened the box, when she was still a woman with a suspicion and a hobby. The chef came into frame below, gloved, sleeves rolled, moving fast. Someone had put her behind, or she had put herself behind. She reached up without looking and took the jar off the high shelf and set it on the low one again, in the same motion she used to move a pan, and went on working. So-yeon watched her do it. Not defiance, efficiency. A woman moving an object out of the way of a camera she had counted the angle of, the same way she counted everything else in that room, and the counting was the part that made So-yeon's hand close on the stair rail. He had not chosen a pretty woman. Beverly Hills is full of those, and every one of them can be paid. He had chosen the only other person in this house who counts. So-yeon went back up before her heel touched the 5th step. At 2 p.m., she canceled the rehearsal florist walkthrough and had her assistant reconfirm the staff roster instead. 14 names on the shift change list for the day after tomorrow. Kitchen, pastry, service, the temporary from Pasadena, the porters. She read all 14 twice. At 3:20, she called the agency in Century City that had placed the chef and asked, as a matter of insurance, for a copy of the original placement contract, and had it emailed, and read the termination clause, and closed the laptop. Firing her would take an hour and prove nothing. Firing her would send a woman out the gate with a bottle-shaped hole in the house, and a man who would spend the rest of a marriage filling it in silence. So-yeon had watched her mother live inside that arrangement for 11 years and go gray at 38. At 6 p.m., she took the box out of the office safe and set it on the desk and opened the lid and left it open, and let the room fill for 10 minutes, and made herself breathe it the whole time, the way you make yourself look at an X-ray. She thought about the ceremony, 600 chairs, her father's hands, the officiant's script in the folder that had been in her office all along. She thought about a man building an object that cannot be remade for a woman who wears gloves because his wife ordered it. She thought about what a thing like that is worth to its owner, and how you find out. Then she picked up the bottle by the neck and weighed it in her palm, and the weight told her the answer, and it was so simple she laughed once out loud in an empty room. You do not take it from him. You take it from her. In front of everyone she works beside, in the room where she counts, with the card read aloud so that 14 people hear the name, and nobody in this house can ever again pretend not to know it. So-yeon closed the lid. She opened her calendar and looked at the day after tomorrow, 2 days out, the last full working day before the rehearsal, and found the line she wanted, shift change. 4 p.m., 14 on the floor. Both crews in the room at once. She wrote nothing down. She turned the ring on her finger once, and put the box in the safe, and set the alarm on her phone for 3:50. 2 floors below, at that exact minute, Mia Torres pulled the flour tin down from the 3rd shelf to count what was inside it, and found the small dented brass tin lying flat on top of the money, exactly where she had left it, and put her hand over it for a second, before she put the lid back on. The rehearsal chairs came off the truck at 7 the next morning, and by noon the South Lawn had 206 of them in rows, because Mia had written the real number on the delivery sheet herself, and the tent foreman had shrugged and unloaded 6 more. She worked the last full day before the rehearsal like a woman closing a book. 14 courses staged in order on the long steel table, every component labeled in her own hand, quantities, hold temperatures, plating sequence, the name of the pan each thing lived in. The agency sous chef read the labels over her shoulder and said nothing. He had stopped pretending he was temporary. At 1, she pulled the 4 crates of ceremony product from the dry store and counted them against the office manifest. 2 units short on the preserved lemon. She wrote it down and taped the note to the crate instead of calling upstairs. Loretta pulled her 3rd tray of test brioche at 2:40 and set it down hard enough to rattle the cooling rack. "You're teaching him," she said. "I'm labeling pans." "You're teaching him." Mia peeled her gloves off, dropped them in the bin, took a fresh pair from the case. "If I go, the wedding still happens. 600 people still eat. Let them eat badly. That's not a thing I know how to want," Mia said. and went back to the fish. At 3, she took the compost out and came back through the service court with her hands empty. 3 cars sat nose out. Seok-jin stood at the driver's door of the middle one with the engine running and the earpiece in, and when she passed he looked at her for a beat longer than a driver looks at a cook. She went inside and did not think about it again for 40 minutes. At 3:50, the day crew started drifting down for the handover. Kitchen porters, 2 housemaids, the linen woman, the night porter who came early to eat, the tent liaison, the sous chef, Loretta, the 2 runners, the florist's assistant, who had been given a corner of the counter for the corsages. Tae-woo came down at 3:56 and stood at the foot of the service stairs with his hands behind his back, which was where he always stood, and Mia registered nothing in it. 14 people, counting her. At 4 o'clock, the elevator opened instead of the stairs. Han So-yeon came out of it carrying a black lacquered box in both hands, flat, the way a person carries something they intend to put down in front of everyone. She crossed to the long steel table and set it on the clean end, beside the labeled pans. The room went quiet by itself. Nobody had to be told. "Chef," she said. Mia set the knife down and stepped back from her board. "Ma'am." Seo-yeon opened the lid. She took out a small squat bottle with a leaning neck and set it upright on the steel, where the light came down hard. Then she took out a card, held it at arm's length, and turned it so the writing faced the room. "Someone can read," she said. "Which of you reads?" No one moved. She read it herself. 2 words, in a voice pitched for a dining room, not a kitchen. "For Mia." The florist's assistant looked at the floor. One of the runners looked at Mia and then away so fast it was almost violent. "That is my husband's hand," Seo-yeon said. "You've all seen his hand on your envelopes at New Year. Look again if you're not sure." She turned the card in a slow arc so it passed every face in the room. Nobody used the permission. Mia's hands were at her sides. The gloves were on. She kept them there. "Do you know what this is?" So-yeon said, lifting the bottle by the neck. "No, ma'am." "That's true," Seo-yeon said, sounding almost interested. "That part is true. He didn't give it to you yet." She pulled the stopper. The kitchen was a room built to hold smells, and it took the smell instantly. Wild sesame toasted past where anyone sane stops, burnt sugar under it, something green at the edge. It went across the steel and into the corners and up the service stairs. Loretta's head came around. Seo-yeon watched Mia's face for it. Mia gave her the same face she gave the plate that came back on the first night. "Item 6, Seo-yeon said. "Nothing leaves this kitchen with an aroma detectable in the corridor. I wrote that. Everybody in this room has been in gloves for 9 days because of a smell." She held the bottle up and turned it slowly. "He had it made in March. 70% of it is her grandmother's seasoning. He asked them 3 times to burn it darker. They told him it would go bitter. He said bitter was correct." The night porter shifted his weight. Tae-woo had not moved from the foot of the stairs. "1 bottle," Seon said. "They don't keep the formula. There is no second one." She let that sit. Then she opened her fingers. The bottle hit the tile between the table and Mia's station, and went off like a dropped light bulb, glass out in a long fan across the floor, amber running under the table and into the grout. The smell tripled. Somebody swore in Korean. The florist's assistant stepped back into a stack of trays, and the trays came down, and that noise landed on top of the first one, and the room stopped being a room. Mia had not moved. "Clean that up," So-yeon said. "Yes, ma'am." "Now, while we're all here." Mia crouched. That was when Loretta came around the end of the pastry bench with flour on her forearms and her bandana pushed back. "No," she said. "Loretta." Mia said it low, without looking up. "No." Loretta's voice went up the stairwell. "She's been on her feet since 4. He follows her around this house like a dog, and you throw glass at her floor and tell her to kneel in it?" 14 people heard it. 14 people heard the word he. So-yeon turned her head slowly, the way a woman turns to read a label. What is your name? Loretta Pike, pastry, 6 years. Mr. Park. So-yeon did not raise her voice for it. Miss Pike is finished. Taewoo came off the stairs. Madam, the rehearsal is. Miss Pike is finished. Walk her to her locker, take her passcode, and see her to the gate. Today's hours will be paid. There's 40 brioche proofing, Loretta said. They'll be on the floor by 6 if nobody. Then they'll be on the floor by 6. Loretta looked at Mia. Mia was on the tile, with her gloved fingers around a curved piece of the neck of the bottle, and she looked up, and what she said was, "Go with him." Mia, go with him, please. Taewoo took Loretta by the elbow, not hard, and the two of them went out through the corridor door, and the door swung twice and stopped. Nobody else in the kitchen was breathing normally. The rest of you, Seo-yeon said, have a shift. They scattered. Not fast. Nobody wanted to look like they were fleeing, but the room emptied itself into stations and pretended, and the sous chef turned on the tap and let it run over nothing for a long time. Mia stayed down. She picked the glass up piece by piece. The gloves made it worse. Nitrile has no fingertips in it. You can hold a piece of glass and not know how it's sitting, and twice a shard turned under her thumb, and she had to set it down and take it again from a different angle. 19 minutes for 12 heads of garlic. She did not know yet what this was going to cost her in minutes, and she kept picking anyway. So-yeon stayed where she was, standing over her, hands folded. You could ask me something, So-yeon said. Mia set a piece of the shoulder of the bottle into her palm. You could ask why I didn't fire you. That's your business, ma'am. It is. So-yeon watched her hands. My mother lived in a house like this for 11 years. There was a woman in Busan. My mother never said her name once. She went gray at 38 and she still sets the table for him. She turned the ring on her finger once, all the way around. I'm not my mother. I don't send women away quietly. I do it in front of the staff, so the house knows what happened, so nobody upstairs gets to decide later that it was nothing. Mia lifted the base of the bottle out of the amber pool. The stopper had rolled under the table, and she had to go flat on her forearm to reach it. You haven't said one word in your own defense, So-yeon said. No, ma'am. Why? Mia sat back on her heels with the stopper in her fist and looked up at her for the first time. Because you'd hear it as an argument. Seon's face did something small and shut it down. She picked her handbag off the table, put the card back in the box, closed the lid, and took the box with her. At the elevator, she stopped. He asked them to make it bitter, she said. That's the part I'd think about, if I were you. The doors closed. Mia finished the floor. It took her 50 minutes with the gloves on, and when she was done, she went over the same square meter again, with a mop and hot water and vinegar, and the smell came up out of the grout every time the mop passed. Sesame and scorched sugar, her grandmother's sundae, and something burnt on top of it. She mopped it 4 times. It stayed. The sous chef said, Chef, the fish. Cover it and put it down to 2 degrees. We'll finish tomorrow. At 6, she went out to the service court, and there was no delivery to take out, and she stood there anyway, with her hands on the top of the empty bin. The tent lights were being tested on the south lawn, coming on in strings, going off, coming on. She could see the top corner of it over the roofline. She went in. She pulled Loretta's 40 brioche out of the proofer, scored them, baked them off at 210, and put them on the rack to cool. Then she sat down on an upturned crate in the dry store, in the dark, and did not turn the light on for 11 minutes. At 7, she called her mother from the walk-in. You sound like your father, her mother said. I'm cold. I'm standing in a fridge. A long breath on the other end, the wet edge in it. Then come out of the fridge. Ma. Mia put her forehead against the shelf upright. If I stopped working there, if it took longer. Longer than what, baby? Longer than the plan. Her mother took her time. Tuesday morning I'm first, she said. The van comes at 6:40. The girl at the desk calls me Mrs. Torres and gives me the chair by the window. I don't know how you did all that, and I stopped asking. A pause. But I know what your grandmother's hands smelled like, and I know what you sound like when you're standing in a fridge. Mia did not say anything for a while. Come home when you can, her mother said. The plan will still be a plan. At 9, the sous chef left. At 9:40, the last runner logged off the tablet. At 10, the house went to its night noises, the compressor cycling, the ice machine dropping, the elevator moving twice for people who weren't hers. Mia went up to her room over the garage. She took the chef jacket off, washed it in the utility sink herself, hung it over the pipe, and let it drip while she wrote. One page, torn from the back of her second list of the 14 courses. She wrote the resignation in the flattest language she owned. Effective immediately, 22 months, thank you for the position. The 14 courses are staged and labeled on the long table. The preserved lemon is 2 units short. She did not write anyone's name in the body except her own at the bottom. Then she went back down and got a bus tray and started stacking. The book came out of her locker from under her street clothes. Provincial Cooking of the South Coast, 411 pages. The corner of page 206 still folded. She unfolded the corner before she set it down. It seemed important to hand it back the way she got it. The 6 white ranunculus had gone brown at the edges and were fully open, the way they do. She set the jam jar next to the book. She went to the wall by the pass and took down the laminated brioche schedule Loretta had taped there, and put that in too, and then took it back out, because it wasn't a gift, and it wasn't hers to return, and she folded it into her pocket. The jacket came down off the pipe damp. She dried it flat with a towel, pressed it with the iron from the linen store, and folded it into thirds the way the house liked linen folded. Trousers under it, apron on top. The clogs she left, because they were hers, and she had bought them in Long Beach in a year when she had nothing. The gloves went on top of the pile. The whole box, 200 pairs, minus what the house had used, set on the folded apron with the lid squared. Then she stood at the third shelf, second from the wall, and pulled the rice sack forward and took down the flour tin. $18,400 in a band, with her mother's invoice folded under it, and lying flat on top of the money, the small dented brass tin, lacquer worn through at the thumb seam. She held it in both hands for a moment. She put the money in her knife roll. She put her mother's invoice in her coat pocket, and she put the brass tin in her coat pocket too, and buttoned the flap over it, and carried the empty flour tin back up to the third shelf where it belonged. At 11:40, she carried the bus tray to the long steel table, cleared a space at the head of it, and set everything out in a line where a man coming down the service stairs would see it before he saw anything else. The book, the jar of open flowers, the folded uniform, jacket, trousers, apron, the box of gloves. The resignation on top of the book weighted with a spoon. She looked at it for a long time to see if it read the way she meant it. It did not. There was no way to make it read the way she meant it. That was the point of putting it there. She left through the service door at 11:51 with the knife roll on her shoulder and her coat buttoned, and walked down the drive past the 3 cars, and Sokjin was standing at the gatehouse and saw her, and lifted one hand, and she lifted hers. The cars came back at 2:15. At 2:40, the service door opened, and Kang Min-jae came down into a kitchen with every light on and nobody in it. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He crossed the room. He did not touch anything for almost a minute. The floor was clean, and the room still smelled like her grandmother, 4 mops deep in the grout, and he stood in that smell in front of a steel table, with his own handwriting on the card he could not see, in a box, upstairs, and worked out most of it in the order the objects gave it to him. The book. Page 206 unfolded. The flowers, opened all the way, past the point where you'd throw them out. The jacket folded like house linen. The gloves, the whole box, squared. He picked up the paper last. He read it twice. Effective immediately. The lemon is 2 units short. Then he set it down and looked at the line of objects laid out end to end on the steel. Every single thing he had put in front of her over 5 months, returned in a row, and left where the staff would see it first in the morning. His hand went flat on the table. A woman who felt something takes one thing with her. She had taken nothing. She had given it all back, in order, labeled, like a station handover, and to a man who had spent 22 months learning to read a room by what people left behind. That line of objects said one thing, and said it clean. He had bought his way in. She had priced every item and refused the total. He stood there until the compressor cycled. Then he took out his phone, and did not call her, and did not call the agency, and put it back in his coat. Upstairs, 2 floors up, the lacquered box sat in a wedding office safe with the card inside it and no bottle. And down in the empty kitchen, Kang Min-jae reached out and straightened the folded apron on top of the pile. 1 inch, the way you square a thing you are about to leave alone forever. He went up the service stairs. He did not turn the lights off. Tae-woo came down at 5 in the morning to turn the lights off and stopped with his hand on the switch. He looked at the line of objects on the steel table, the way he read a table setting before service, left to right, counting. Book, jar, jacket, trousers, apron, glove box, resignation under a spoon. He counted it twice. Then he went up and knocked on the door of a man who had been sitting in the dark of his own study since 3. "Sir, there is something missing from the kitchen." Min-jae had the resignation in his hand. He had carried it up. She gave everything back. "No, sir." Tae-woo stayed in the doorway. 31 years had taught him where to stand. She gave back everything that cost money. The pause in the room lasted 4 seconds. "Say it!" "The tin, sir." "The brass one. It is not on the table." Min-jae stood up. He walked past the butler, down 2 flights, into the kitchen, and put his hand flat on the steel where the objects were laid out. Book, jar, uniform, gloves. He looked at the empty end of the line, the way a man looks at a missing tooth with his tongue. He took the flour tin off the 3rd shelf, empty, lid on, put back exactly as she had left it. "She took her money," he said. "She took her money," Tae-woo agreed, "and one thing that was yours. It cost nothing. It cost you 4 afternoons in a produce market on Western where nobody knew your name." Tae-woo removed his glasses and folded them into his breast pocket, which he had done twice in 3 decades. "Forgive me, I do not usually speak." Min-jae turned the folded apron over. Underneath, nothing. "The book was $2,000, Tae-woo said. "The flowers were 40, the envelope was 9,000. All of that came back, sir, and you read it as a verdict. But a woman leaving a house takes what she wants and returns what she owes. She kept the tin." She kept the tin. The oven fan clicked on for the pastry timer nobody had set. There were 40 brioche racked on the bench, cooled, baked at 210 by a woman who had already written her resignation. Min-jae looked at the brioche for a long moment. "Who fired Loretta Pike?" "Madam, through me." Tae-woo put his gloves back on. "At 4 o'clock yesterday, there were 14 of us on the floor. For what? For saying out loud what the Perfume said in writing." The word landed. Min-jae's hand stopped on the edge of the steel. "The Perfume," he said. "On the tiles, sir, between this table and that station." Madam read the card to the room first. Tae-woo's voice held level, the way it held for guests. The chef cleaned the glass up herself, in gloves. It took her 50 minutes. There is a particular quality to a kitchen at 5 in the morning when the extraction is off. Min Jae crouched. He put 2 fingers into the grout between the tiles where the mop had gone 4 times. He brought his fingers up, and the smell was on them: wild sesame, burnt sugar. Bitter, because he had asked 3 times for it to be bitter. He stayed down there on one knee for 11 seconds. Then he stood, and every calculation he had made in the last 2 hours turned over. "Get me the address." "She has not signed a release, sir, and I am not going to give you the address of a woman who left through the service door at 11:51 at night." Tae-woo held his eyes. "I will do something else. I will call her. Now. At 7. She sleeps until 6:30, and I will not begin this by taking that from her too." Nobody had spoken to Min Jae like that in 9 years. He nodded once. Tae-woo called at 7:04 from the linen room, standing, with his back straight, as if she could see him. Mia was on her mother's couch on Vermont Avenue with the knife roll on the floor beside her and $18,400 inside it. She listened to a butler say the words, "He is asking to see you," and watched a bus stop at the corner outside the window. "No," she said. Tae-woo did not fill the silence. "Tell him I read the tablet for 22 months, Mia said. "Tell him I know what a house does with a woman it keeps downstairs. He is not asking that. He's asking me to be the reason." Her voice stayed even, which cost her. "If he calls that off because of me, then in 10 years I'm the woman who broke it. His uncle gets to say it. The house gets to say it. My mother gets to hear it. No. Then what does the chef require?" Tae-woo asked, and used the title on purpose. Mia looked at the brass tin on the coffee table, lid dented, lacquer worn through at the thumb seam. If he ends it as his own decision, not a trade, not one woman for another. He stands there and he says it for himself, out loud, where everyone hears it, and my name stays out of his mouth. She breathed once, and if he can't, he marries her Saturday, and he never comes down those stairs again. Shall I repeat it exactly? Word for word. "And Mr. Park, hire Loretta Pike back, or don't call me again." She hung up. She put the tin in her coat pocket and buttoned the flap and went to make her mother breakfast. Tae-woo repeated it word for word at 7:12, standing in the study, hands at his sides. Min Jae listened to the whole thing without interrupting. At the end, he asked one question. "She said my name stays out of it?" "She said your mouth, sir." He went to the rehearsal. 206 chairs on the south lawn. The agency sous chef ran 14 courses off Mia's labels and did not miss a hold temp because she had written the timings in her own hand for a man she owed nothing. So-yeon's mother landed at 1 and was driven in by Sok-jin. Do-yoon arrived at 4 with the jade beads clicking and shook 11 hands. Min Jae walked the aisle when they asked him to walk the aisle. He stood where the officiant put him. When they rehearsed the vows, he said the placeholder line the coordinator gave him, which was the word, yes. So-yeon watched him say it and turned the ring on her finger once. That night, the house slept. Nobody came down the service stairs into a kitchen run by a man from Pasadena. Saturday, 600 chairs. The tent came down and the lawn went white with peonies, and 300 Italian stems. And by 10 in the morning, there were cars 2 deep along the drive, with drivers standing beside them. So-yeon wore ivory silk with a cathedral veil. Her father sat in the front row beside a man who owned 4 berths at the port. Do-yoon sat on the aisle with his coat over his shoulders in 80-degree heat. The processional ran 9 minutes. Min Jae stood at the front in matte black with his hands loose. The officiant read the opening, then the question. Min Jae did not answer it. 3 seconds. In a tent of 600 people, 3 seconds is a long time. Somebody coughed in the 4th row. The officiant repeated the question. softer, the way you help a nervous man. Min-jae looked at Seo-yun through the veil. No, he said. He said it at conversational volume, and the tent heard it anyway. He took the band off his left hand. He did it without hurry, turning it twice past the knuckle, and held it in his palm. I never loved you. His voice carried to the back without rising. You knew that in March. Your father knew it. Mine would have known it. I let 600 people be brought here anyway, and that is mine, not yours. Seo-yun's hand came up to the veil and stopped. Say a reason, she said. There isn't one you'd accept. Say it anyway. I'm not going to give you a name to hate. The tent moved. Someone in the middle rows stood, then sat. So-yun's father was on his feet, with a hand on the chair in front of him. Min-jae put the ring on the small table where the officiant's book lay, next to the glass of water nobody had touched. Everyone here came for a signature, he said. There isn't one. He looked at So-yun one more time. Whatever passed between them, it was not an apology. He had run out of the right to one. He walked back down the aisle. 600 people watched a man in black go the wrong direction through his own wedding, and the string quartet, having no instruction, played nothing at all. Under the veil, Seo-yun stood alone at the front of a tent with her chin level and her spine drilled, and let them look. She stayed there 50 seconds longer than she needed to. Then she lifted the veil herself, in front of all of them, and walked out through the side. Her mother caught her wrist at the edge of the lawn. Seon removed the hand, politely, and kept walking. Do-yoon met his nephew at the cars. You know what you just did? Yes. Han signs with Choi by Monday. The jade beads went still. 4 births. 19 years your father waited for that man's daughter to be old enough. I know what my father waited for. Do-yoon squinted up at him in the heat. The family will vote. Vote today. They voted at 3:40 in the dining room of the estate, with the tent still standing on the lawn outside, and 11 men at a table set for a wedding lunch that nobody ate. Do-yoon stripped him in 90 minutes. The alliance dissolved in a phone call to Han's attorney. The port licenses, 3 of them, held in a holding company Min-jae's father had built the year he was born, went back to the family under a clause about conduct that had been written for a different kind of scandal. They put the transfer papers in front of him at 5:10. Yoon Suk-jin stood at the door with his earpiece in and looked at the floor. Min-jae read all 4 documents. He asked one question about a subclause. Then he signed his own losses in his own hand, page by page, and slid them back across the table before he made a single phone call to a single ally who might have counted votes for him. Do-yoon watched him do it. You could have fought this. I'd have won it in 8 months and spent them here. Min-jae capped the pen and set it down. I have somewhere to be. With who? Nobody you're going to meet. He walked out through the kitchen. The sous chef stood up straight and got nothing. On the steel table, the objects were still there. Min-jae picked up the jar with the 6 ranunculus, brown-edged, fully open, and carried it upstairs and put it on the windowsill of a bedroom where the lacquered box no longer was. That night, Tae-woo hung a new card by the pass with 2 items on it. Item 1, gloves as required by law and food safety, and not 1 line further. Item 2, the kitchen is the chef's room. There was no chef. 11 days went by. The tent company took 8 hours to pull the lawn apart. So-yun's things left in 4 trips and she supervised none of them. She was in Seoul by Wednesday and her attorney handled the rest. And the last thing she took out of the wedding office safe was a black lacquer box with a hand-cut card inside it, which she kept, which nobody ever explained. Sok-jin canceled every Han meeting on the calendar, 9 of them, and then asked, once, whether he still had a job. He was told to keep driving. Min-jae sold the family's remaining port share on the 9th day, at 4 cents under market, to a Panamanian carrier because they could close in 48 hours. Do Yoon called him twice about it and was not called back. Loretta Pike was rehired on the second day with 6 years of seniority restored, back pay for the day she was walked to the gate, and an apology delivered in person by a butler in white gloves. She took the apology. She did not take the job. On the 11th day, at 4 in the afternoon, a black car stopped 100 feet short of a bus stop on Vermont Avenue. Mia was sitting on the bench with the knife roll across her knees and a folder of paperwork under her arm, waiting for the 204. She had been to see a landlord about a room. The landlord had wanted $12,000 to hold it another 4 months, and she had $18,400 and a mother with a Tuesday appointment. Min-jae walked the 100 feet and sat down on the far end of the bench, leaving space for a person between them. "I heard," she said. "From who?" "Everyone." She kept her eyes on the traffic. 14 people were in that kitchen, and they all have phones. He set a small box on the bench in the space between them. Not lacquer, cardboard, the kind a hardware store uses. Inside, one key. Mia looked at it and her hands closed on the knife roll. "No," she said. "Open it." "I said no to a book, and to $9,000, and to a bottle I never even got to smell." Her voice went low and hard. "You don't buy the last thing." "Not that one. That one's mine. It isn't yours yet." He turned the box so the key faced her. "It isn't mine either. There's a room on Vermont, 11 blocks up, and it's empty, and I rented it for one night. Tonight. That's what the key is." She looked at him then, for the first time. "One night. The lease is in nobody's name. Tomorrow it goes back on the market, and the landlord takes whoever's got the cash, and that might be you. In 4 months, and it might not be." He put his hands on his knees. "I've never heard you say it out loud. 22 seats. Somewhere with parking. That's all you ever gave me." "Because you'd have bought it." "I would have." He said it plainly. "I can't now. They took the licenses on Saturday, and the port share sold on Wednesday, and what's left is a house I don't want, and about enough to be a person with. So I rented an empty room for one night because that's what I can afford, and because you have never once been in a room where somebody had to listen." A bus came, the 204. Mia let it go past. "You lost all of it," she said. "I signed it myself before I called anybody." "That part matters to me." He watched a car pull out of the lot across the street. "And I didn't say your name in that tent. Not to her, not to my uncle, not to the 600. I know. How? Because 11 days went by, and nobody came to my mother's door." She let out one breath that shook on the way out, and steadied on the way back in. "That's how I knew you meant it." He waited. Mia picked up the key. She did not put it in her pocket. She held it in her fist with her thumb over the teeth. "I'm not saying yes," she said. "I'm not asking one. Here's what I'll do." She stood, shouldered the knife roll, tucked the folder under her arm. "I'll unlock that door, and I'll start talking. The pass goes at 34 inches, 22 seats, 4 two-tops by the window, no reservations after 9. Salted crab on the last Sunday of the month, and it comes out of a 1978 book you'll never see, because I gave it back and I meant it. And me. You get to stand there and listen for as long as I'm talking." She looked down at him on the bench. "And then it's time. Months of it. Years, probably. And you don't get to buy a single one of them." Min-jae stood. 11 blocks. "I know where it is. I've been standing outside it for 2 years." They walked. He carried nothing, because she had not offered him the roll and he had not asked. At the corner she stopped, turned the key over once in her hand, and went the last 20 feet ahead of him. The door stuck. She put her shoulder into it, the way she had put her shoulder into a walk-in door for 22 months, and it gave. She went in first. In her coat pocket, buttoned, riding against her hip, was a small brass tin with a dented lid, the only thing in that house she ever stole, and the only thing in his life he had ever earned. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever cooked, cleaned, or worked for people who ate what you made and never once said your name? Has someone ever tried to pay you for what they should have chosen out loud? And if the door finally opened, would you walk in, or would you ask him to end it first? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, silence, and self-worth, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.